أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات بيجي محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Continuing with the tafsir of Surat al Noor, I recited verse number 30. If you remember, the last three verses were prelude to this verse, as they were all advising mankind towards lowering of the gaze, lowering of the eyes, and the admonition in regards to the dangers of looking and whatnot. And here it says, tell the faithful men to cast down their looks and to guard their private parts. That is more decent for them. Allah is indeed well aware of what they do. Some of the points that we derive from this particular verse, we see that the word yaghuddu comes from the root ghadda, which means to cut down or lower. Hence Luqman, Hakim Luqman, in chapter Luqman, when he's advising his son, he says, وَغْضُضْ مِن صَوْتِكَ, lower your voice and don't speak loudly. So the same word or the verb is used over there in the sense of lowering the voice. Here it is used in the sense of lowering your eyes, lowering your gaze, casting down your eyes and not looking up where it's not supposed to, when you're not supposed to look up. Here also when غَضَّ بَصَرٍ, it doesn't mean to close your eyes. So over there when he says lower your voice, he wasn't telling him to stop speaking. He was telling him to lower the sound, lower the voice. You don't need to speak above someone in order to prove your point. You can speak softly and get your point across. And that is the most civilized method of speaking. Over here, غَض also is referring to not closing it. Rather, it means to lower it. You still look. You're not going to be closing your eyes, so unless you run into a wall or something, you're still going to be looking, yet you'll just be casting down your eyes and your gaze. So the word ghaz over here in the sense of lowering. Second word is that being used over here is furuj. Furuj literally means the private parts, is the plural for that, means private parts, which must be covered from onlooker's eye. Although in other places of Quran, when it says, they protect their, furuj, or they protect their, private parts. For example, in Surat al Mu'minun, verse number 5, it says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ this, الَّذِينَ that, and it comes to this, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. That these are the people, mu'mineen are the one who protect their private parts. Over there, or any place else, wherever the word furuj has appeared, is referring towards the staying away from the indecent act of adultery. Only over here it is what it is saying, protecting and literally covering your body parts from an onlooker's eye. So in this verse, based on some tradition, it means protection of eyes from seeing unlawful things, rather than the furuj. In other places in Quran, it refers towards the concept of adultery. Tradition about looking. We get a tremendous amount of ahadith in regards to as far as the etiquettes of looking is concerned. In fact, in our fiqh, there is a chapter of ahkam of nigah kardan, or looking at someone. There's ahkam, there's a whole chapter about it. And there are guidelines and there are ahkam pertaining to that. We see in a hadith from our Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. And this hadith is in Khisal. It says, Imam said, لَكُمْ أَوَّلُ نَظْرَةٍ إِلَى الْمَرْأَةِ فَلَا تُتْبِعُوهَا نَظْرَةً أُخْرَى وَاحْذَرُوا الْفِتْنَةِ. He said, first look is allowed, as this is where we derive our laws. So we derive our laws from this ayat of Quran, and then we look at the ahadith that Masumeen have said in this regard, and that's where they derive the further expansion of the laws. So you look at this hadith from Imam, he says, the first look is allowed. So when you looked at someone, it's allowed. But the consecutive looks are problematic, as it will lead to corruption. So therefore, the concept is being mentioned over here, similar into this ayah, and what Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying over here, أَوَّلُ لَكُمْ أَوَّلُ نَظْرَةً. For you, the first nazar is allowed, because you sometimes might even look to, to see what's going on and what's in front of you. But then, when you've seen what is in front of you, the second look is something which is not permissible. So therefore, the concept of hurmat comes into play. We read in another hadith, it says, all eyes will be weeping on the day of judgment except 3 eyes. The eye which is fearful of Allah, eye which is lowered or closed in front of sins, and the eye which remains vigil in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we lower our gaze, when we close our eyes, when we cast down, that is indeed an eye which will not be weeping on the day of judgment. And you do not want to be the eye which is weeping on that particular day. In Sahih al-Bukhari, we read that Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam went to the extent, he said, don't sit in the path of the people. So, there are bazaar, there are marketplaces, sometime, not over here, but I'm sure places that we come from, we've seen how they start out very nicely, but then they start increasing and they start taking up room, and then you see that the pathway has decreased to this much. It's literally no room for people to walk by, as some of the very congested markets and bazaars when in back home, for example. So when you take up some people who are, this is the pathway, it is made for people to walk. First of all, you should not be usurping their right to walk. Once you have done so, Prophet says, don't sit in the path of the people. Some people reply that we don't have any choice, we have to do that. Prophet then added, then pay their dues. When asked about what is the dues, Prophet replied by saying, وَمَا حَقُّ الطَّرِيقِ. He said, غَضُّ الْبَصَرِ وَكَفُّ الْأَذَى وَرَدُّ السَّلَامِ وَأَمْرٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَنَهْيٌ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Lower your eyes. Do not, have your eyes wandering around, looking at them. Kafful adha, do not harm them. Waraddu salam, reply back to their salam. Amr bil maruf and nahi anil munkar. This is the dues that is incumbent upon you when you have blocked someone's path and you have not given them a space to walk around. If you do such a thing, Prophet is saying this sort of becomes the sadaqah. This sort of becomes the compensation for the act that you have performed. We also read when Hazrat Isa ﷺ, he said, avoid looking at non-mahram, as it will plant the seed of lust in your heart, which is enough for your corruption. So just the concept of looking is so devastating, and we all agree to it. That's why there's so much emphasis laid down. Amir al-Mu'mineen at another place has, al-aynu ra'idul qalb, eyes, or the eyes rather, drag the heart along with it. Whatever the eyes see, I recited the other day, baridul qalb. Eye is what? It's the postman it's the delivery man for the heart. It delivers the information from this eye and delivers it directly to the heart. So right away, whatever is seen, it is affecting the heart. It's a tremendous phenomena that how quickly the effect is of the eye onto the heart. The transfer of information and is so subtle that we don't even realize it. And therefore, these ahadith exist. It says, Al-aynu ra'idul qalb, al-aynu masa'idul shaitan. That the eye drags the heart along with it, and the eye is a den for shaitan, from where he ambushes his victim. So therefore, guard your eyes and do not let it be free. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa. So all of these ahadith, under this verse of Surah Noor, verse number 30 that we recited, and then verse number 31st, inshallah, we'll recite tomorrow, which is pertaining to the hijab of the women. So this is discussing the hijab of the men. And I say this, that, hijab of the women is much easier than the hijab of the men. Hijab of the women is they have to cover themselves. So it's easy, you can cover yourself. You don't have to worry about an onlooker, you just have to cover yourself. But the hijab of men is so difficult that you have to lower your eyes. That's the hijab for men. And it's very difficult because we talked about it the other day as well. These organs, they're not under our control. We don't have any control over many of these organs. These organs, in other words, have their own mind. They do whatever they want to. Their desires overcome the desires and the conviction that we have inside us. So we lose control over them, and they are wandering around. So this is why Prophet said, "An-nazaru sahmun masmumun min siham iblis, faman tarakaha khawfan min Allah atahu Allahu imanan yajidu halawatahu fi qalbi." A bad look is a poisoned arrow from the arrows of Iblis. Whoever closes his eye with the fear of Allah, Allah will grant him faith, sweetness of which he can feel inside. So we want a faith. We want the iman, from the iman that we can feel inside us. Not just the iman that we have, yes, learned these things, or we have recited the kalama, or we have recited the shahadatan. No, the iman which you can feel inside your body, inside your soul. You can feel the sweetness of that iman. How do you get that? By lowering the eyes. Prophet also added, whoever fills his eyes with haram, obviously haram looks, in this world, his eyes will be filled with fire on the day of judgment. Messages that we learned from this ayah, these were some of the points that we derived from it. Protecting the eyes from haram is part of our faith. That's why this ayah began by saying, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Not to, لِلْكَافِرِينَ or لِلْيَهُودِ وَلِلْنَصَارَى وَلِلْإِنسَانِ. No, it's a قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only advising the mu'mineen. So we understand lowering the eyes is part of the iman. That's why mu'mineen are being addressed over here. Instinctive attractions must be controlled. يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Protecting the eyes from seeing haram is a prelude to chastity. So therefore, if you can do this muqaddama, then in the later part, when it becomes more difficult, you'll be able to control as well. Chastity is also mandatory for men, as this ayat is all talking about men covering themselves or controlling their eyes. It says, يَحْفُظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. To look at someone flirtatiously or unchastely becomes an obstacle in the spiritual growth of insan. يَغُضُّ يَحْفَظُ وَأَزْكَى. These three words have appeared. يَغُضُّ, so you lower. يَحْفِظُ, you protect. Azka, you become pure. So this is the formula that is being given over here. Threefold formula. يَغُضُّ, you lower them. يَحْفِظُ, you protect your body parts, those private parts, from committing those crimes. And azka, you will eventually lead to this purification. Threefold formula in one ayat. How much better does it get? That's where we see that is the kalam of Hakim. In one ayah, it gives you the formula and it concludes with it. There's no longer discussion. It's you and I which we go into the details of it and the longer discussions of it so that we can make sense of these things. We're always in the presence of Allah. Let's not disobey Him. Inna Allaha khabirum bima yasna'un. The later part of the ayah says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala verily knows what you do. So it's worth noticing the Quran doesn't tell us from what should we protect our eyes. All this ayat was telling us, just protect your eyes. It did not at one place tell us from what should we protect our eyes. What is one thing? The Quran should have counted at least 1, 2, 3 things. Okay, protect your eyes from this, protect your eyes from this, protect your eyes from this. All is said, just protect your eyes. That's all it said. So here we understand when Quran did not limit anything, so there is a large scale of things which fall under this category. Reason for not mentioning it, to keep it general. So there are many things that you need to protect your eyes. It's not just 1 or 2 things. And that's the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept it general. But because the next verse and the previous verses were talking about the hijab of women, it is understood that this verse is advising us to keep our eyes lower in the presence of not mahram. So it sort of does give it away, but not in this particular ayah, but rather in the next ayah. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad pa. 17th of Ramadan also marks the day when the first battle was fought, and that was the battle of Badr. In the second year after the Hijrat, on 17th of Ramadan, Muslims engaged into first battle with the kuffar of Makkah. Why did the Muslims go into this battle? What was the reason behind it? All that details I'm sure you've heard many times. Who fought in it, and all of those details. Our discussion is with Quran, so we will keep it with Quran only. We see that Muslims in the Battle of Badr, it is actually a recent phenomena that people are raising such questions. And you will understand the conclusion that I will derive. Unfortunately, I'll only have 7 or 8 minutes, so I want all of your attention. The conclusion that we will derive as to how this phenomena or these questions are being raised now. It says that in the battle, Muslims in the Battle of Badr closed the water onto the enemy so they can take revenge So then, obviously closing the water, it'll be easier for you to deprive them of water out of thirst. You'll be able to go ahead and defeat them. They said, well, this is actually the exact repercussion or the result of what happened in Karbala. Was not the same war tactic that was used by Yazid and his army in Karbala to stop the water flow, stop the water from reaching the camps of Imam Hussein. So over there, you call that to be zulm, oppression in Karbala. But when Muslims did it in the Battle of Badr, it was a war tactic. So when you use it yourself, it's a war tactic. But when it is being used against you over there in Karbala, it becomes oppression. Where do you draw the line? So this is something which is recently some, musannifin are actually posing these questions. And you can understand where this is coming from. It is coming from the same, the Wahhabi mentality, which just shows and portrays that it was a war in Karbala between, two groups of Muslimin. They were fighting one another, and it wasn't really a big deal. Don't make a big deal out of it. The hypothesis must be proven in the question before one can say why. Before you go ahead and raise a question, why, you got to prove the point that you're making. That yes, Muslims indeed stopped the water or deprived the kuffar from reaching to the water. You need to prove that first, historically, then you can raise the question why they did it. Because why part does not come into play unless that part is proven. This is a very popular question these days. As I said before, if we pay close attention to it, we can understand that the real reason behind this question, it wasn't raised to be answered. Rather, it was raised to pose three other things, or maybe other conclusions. First is Muslim cut off the water supply for their enemies of Badr, so you start off from that. Second, the event of Karbala was the reaction and revenge or a similar type of battle, because they also closed the water on Imam Hussein and his army. The Battle of Karbala was a normal battle between two groups who were against each other, and there was no oppression at play over there. We see that firstly, therefore, it must be proven that Muslims actually did cut off water upon kuffar in the Battle of Badr. That never happened, nor can it be found in any of the authentic historical accounts or the books of history. Secondly, we know that it is against the teachings of Islam, especially when Prophet himself is there, to go ahead and cut off the water supply onto those who are standing against you, even if it might go in your own favor. This was a practice that was never done, at least in the time of Rasulullah, or in the times, the battles that were fought in the times of Masumin alayhi salatu wasalam. Also, and if it was allowed, Imam Hussein had control over the water initially. When he arrived in Karbala, who had control over this water? Imam Hussein had control over this water. This is where Imam alayhi salatu wasalam gives water to Hur, and gives not just to the Hur, but also the animals were quenching their thirst with the water that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam had under his possession. In Battle of Siffin, Muawiyah had control over water initially, deprived Imam Ali's army from reaching this water. Imam ordered his people to go ahead and take control back of that water, because we don't want to be dying over here thirsty. They went, they fought, they took control over the water. And then some of Imam's companions say, now should we go ahead and do the same thing what they did to us, deprive them? Imam said, no. What difference will there be between you and them then? No, let them have this water. A lot of people were ticked off from that we were deprived a moment ago. Now we have control of this body of water. Why shouldn't we do the same treatment to these individuals? Second, in the Battle of Badr, neither Muslims were in the position to cut off the water upon the enemies, nor were the kuffar had the ability. In fact, if you go ahead and read, therefore neither one had that ability to go ahead and take full control of it. Enemies of Islam were defeated because of the strong conviction and determinations of Muslim, not due to thirst. Don't try to make it into an event because the kuffar in Battle of Badr died or they lost because of water issue. In the beginning of the battle, 3 swordsmen from each side laid the foundation, where Muslims came up on top by killing their counterparts. Utbah died from the blow received by Amir al-Mu'mineen, not because of extreme thirst. That was the reason that laid the foundation, and then later on with the ayat that I will recite what happened. Thirdly, ordering and the situation of the 2 armies at Badr was in a way that it was difficult for both sides to reach the water. Although enemy had slight edge upon Muslims from the aspect of better arsenal, they had more people, they had better weaponry, they had more animals, they had all of these resources, they were better. In fact, they were actually situated in a better, higher altitude place than Muslims were. Muslims were in a valley. We read that in Surah Anfal, verse number 42 says what? إِذْ أَنْتُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ بِالْعُدْوَةِ الْقُصْوَى. It's a recall when your enemy was positioned at a less defensible brink of the valley, the pagans' army had the more defensible, higher side than of yours. So this is the ayat of Quran is clearly mentioning how they were situated at a lower part, Muslimin were, and the kuffar were situated at a higher elevated place. And we all know from having seen all of these wars, have read all of these wars, have watched movies in regards to wars, what happens if someone is at higher altitude and someone else is at the lower altitude? Who has the advantage? The one who has the higher altitude. So therefore over here, Muslimin were actually, had a lesser defensible place than the kuffar according to this ayat of Surah Anfal, verse number 42. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this situation did not take place according to your previous plans. Ayat continues, otherwise everything would have been different, but in order that Allah may carry through a matter that was bound to be fulfilled. How did He carry through? This is where the ayat of Quran explains it further. The verse clearly points out that you were situated in a lower place, which made you even weaker. We're talking about Battle of Badr. But God gave you victory. How did He give you the victory? As mentioned in the next few verses explicitly, He made them see your number higher than you actually were. Kuffar were looking at you and they were seeing multiple people. Bifocal glasses, you look at, you see images of more. They were looking at Muslimin and they were seeing multiple people. And when Muslimin were looking at the kuffar, they were seeing lesser people. Just imagine having this vision that you're seeing your enemy, they're less than you. And they are seeing you more in numbers. And this was something, obviously, a miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had done. So He made them see your number higher than you actually had, and made you see them less than what they actually were, which resulted in them being frightened and you being empowered over them. Zamakhshari clearly points out after the advantage that Muslimin had, they were in a terrible situation. They were, first of all, they were a lower place. They didn't have this arsenal. They didn't have these weaponry. They didn't have enough people. They didn't have enough horsemen. They didn't have enough animals. None of those things existed. So they were in a terrible situation. They had missed the caravan which was passing through, and it was possible that the guards might join the enemy's army as well. Fundamentally, Muslims hadn't come to fight either. Why did they come over there? That's another story. They didn't come to fight, so they were not prepared for a battle. By any means, it would not have gone in the favor of Muslimin. They suddenly found themselves facing the enemy, and Kashaf, in Tafsir Kashaf, Zamakhshari mentions it under this verse of Surah Anfal, verse number 42. Salawat Beji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tafsir Safi and Al-Mizan also mentioned that enemy had control over the water, but didn't have the ability to deprive Muslims from reaching it, as they hadn't surrounded the Muslims as opposed to Karbala. They had them completely surrounded from all directions because they were just simply too many in numbers. With all this, still it became difficult for Muslims to reach the water at Badr, for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent rain upon them. So it was difficult for them to reach water. What did Allah do? Surah Anfal, verse number 11 says, we sent rain upon you so we can quench your thirst. Hence we can see, and this is where the conclusion is being drawn, 1 minute, inshallah I will end. We can see the reason why this doubt was ever created. It wanted to infuse the three above mentioned false claims. Cutting off the water by Muslims at Badr resulted in Karbala being a mere revenge, and the reaction, as quoted by Yazid, that it had the martyrs of Badr been here, they would have seen what I have achieved today. So he said that himself. And then no oppression ever took place in Karbala. It was a battle between two groups. They fought for their rights. One came out successful, the other one didn't. If these people had read these sources, which they might have, would know that Muslims were never in a position to do that, cut off the water supply. Quran is also proof of that. Even if they had the capability, they wouldn't have done so, because if that was the case, Prophet would not have allowed it, as we seen in the seerah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Battle of Siffin. and in the seerah of Imam Hussein when the Battle of Karbala initially began. So this was just a historical account from the ayat of Surah Anfal, verse number 11 and verse number 42, and the verses after that in regards to Battle of Badr, which took place on 17th of Ramadan in the second year after Hijrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to Muslimin in that, and it set the platform for Islam to grow and flourish as it did until they came back to conquest of Mecca in the 8th year of Hijrah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to be able to follow these commands that we learn from Quran, as well as the commands of Ma'sumin alayhimu salatu wasalam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the zuhur of our awaited Imam, make us among the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhiru da'wana, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.